Those lighter winds still feeling pleasant in the sunshine. For the beginning of the weekend, once again a cold and frosty start, this time across many northern areas, but through the course of the day brightening up, and we're likely to see fewer showers for the start of the weekend. That's away from northern parts of Scotland, so some bright sunshine on offer, but perhaps turning a little bit cloudier into the afternoon, and into next week staying largely dry, but it is going to be remaining cold, still with a chance of some overnight frost. Bye-bye.
We'll see a cold snap, which will quickly develop into a warm front. Boxed Boiler Repairs, sponsors of weather on GB News.
You could have £17,777 in tax-free cash to play with this spring. Cash to spend on anything you like. And if that wasn't enough, we're also going to give you not one, but two sought-after designer watches and the latest Mulberry handbag. How would winning that sound? For a chance to win the cash, 2 watches and a designer bag, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus 1 standard network rate message. Or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus 1 standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. Call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB12 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 4th of April. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
Basically, we know the people behind Bond are the Broccoli family. And for the last 30 years, Cubby Broccoli's daughter, Barbara, and her half-brother, Michael G. Wilson, have been looking after the franchise and done very well with it. When you think of what a great Bond Daniel Craig was.
Yeah.
Now, we haven't had a new movie for 4 years, and now it looks like Amazon are going to take over the helm, and apparently relations are strained between Barbara and Stephen and Amazon, which to me sounds like they've, even though it's their baby, they've been pushed aside. So they've decided to step back. So now this new guy, Jeff Bezos from Amazon, is asking you who you would like to be the next 007. One name in the papers is Tom Cruise. But he's American. But well,
this is what worries me about Amazon having it, though. It's going to become really Americanized.
Yeah, or very, very woke. I mean, are we going to have a woman playing James Bond?
I don't know if Jeff Bezos is that woke, is he?
Well, no, but Amazon are quite woke, aren't
they? No, they were woke when it was trendy to be woke, and now that we've got Trump in the White House, then they're not going to be woke at all. I mean, it's the Americanization I worry about, and I mean, I do know somebody else who was in for it, who is Ian Fleming's great nephew, who would have kept it in Britain, right?
It should be kept in Britain,
and it's. I mean, you know, the Broccolis. They were American. Oh, she is American. But, I mean, they were based in Britain. And we want it to stay British.
They'll keep it at Pinewood. Right time.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Good evening, everybody. You're watching State of the Nation on GB News Tonight with me, Matt Goodwin, the show that speaks up for you, the forgotten majority. On tonight's show, two-tier Britain continues as activists get away with defacing a Cambridge University painting of Arthur Balfour. If your cause is fashionable, you now get away with your crimes. I'll also be bringing a State of the Nation exclusive tonight. I will be joined by a barrister who is blowing the whistle on DEI ideology in the judicial system. All will be revealed for this evening's finale. Now, as a split on the right emerges following the Reform UK Civil War, we're going to be debating tonight whether, indeed, it is time for mass deportations in Britain. Plus, I will be asking if we need to take inspiration from President Trump's decision to crack down on woke universities. That's State of the Nation tonight with me, Matt Goodwin, starts right now. Now, I'll also be joined tonight by my top panel, assistant comment editor at The Telegraph, Poppy Coburn, and political commentator Eve McQuillan. As ever, let me know your views at gbnews.com/yoursay or hit me up on X at GoodwinMJ. But now it's time for the News Bulletin with Aaron Armstrong.
Thank you very much indeed, Matt. A good evening to you. Our top stories. Donald Trump says Vladimir Putin's comments on the US ceasefire plan are promising but not complete after the Russian president suggested he has issues with the proposal. Well, the US president was speaking alongside the head of NATO in the Oval Office shortly after Putin addressed the war in Ukraine in his own news conference, where the Russian leader appeared to set out a series of sweeping conditions that would need to be met before he'd agree to such a truce. Well, Trump says NATO is stepping up in terms of providing European security, and he'll make sure Russia doesn't attack US allies, adding he has leverage over Putin without elaborating on it. Trump says it will be disappointing if Russia rejects the proposals, but suggests progress is being made.
And maybe we're close. We're getting words that things are going okay in Russia, and it doesn't mean anything until we hear what the final outcome is. But they have very serious discussions going on right now with President Putin and others. And hopefully they all want to end this nightmare. It's a nightmare. It's a horrible thing.
Well, earlier, Putin indicated Russia's in favour of the ceasefire, but says serious issues will have to be resolved before progress can be made. Putin suggested Ukraine should neither rearm nor mobilise, and Western military aid to Kyiv be halted during a 30-day pause. Now, he was speaking alongside Belarus's leader, Alexander Lukashenko, ahead of a meeting with Donald Trump's envoy, Steve Witkoff, who's in Moscow for talks about the war. Thousands of jobs in the UK's healthcare sector will be cut after the Prime Minister announced NHS England's to be abolished to tackle bureaucracy and restore democratic control. NHS England deploys around 13,500 people. The move is expected to take up to 2 years. Well, the Prime Minister says the state's overstretched and unfocused, and he says abolishing the world's biggest quango will allow the service to reduce waiting lists. Sir Keir says the decision has been influenced by global events.
National security is economic security and strength abroad, and we definitely need that more than ever at the moment, but that demands security back at home.
Well, the Health Secretary, Wes Streeting, says the NHS has become more expensive while delivering worse care for patients across the country.
Health and Social Care Act established more than 300 new NHS organisations, created a complex and fragmented web of bureaucracy, and, to quote the Darzi investigation, imprisoned more than 1 million NHS staff in a broken system. Well, today, Madam Deputy Speaker, we are putting the final nail in the coffin of the Conservatives' disastrous top-down reorganisation of the NHS.
Finally, a teenager who stabbed a schoolgirl to death in a row over a teddy bear has been jailed for at least 23 years. Hassan Sentamu had a history of attacking girls and carrying knives before he killed Eliane Andam in Croydon in September 2023. He had admitted manslaughter but was found guilty of murder and having a blade after a jury rejected his claim that autism affected his ability to exercise self-control. That's it for the moment from the GB Newsroom. I'll be back with more in an hour's time.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Welcome back tonight to State of the Nation with me, Matt Goodwin. Now, it seems that almost everywhere that we look in modern Britain today, we see yet more evidence of a two-tier society. It began with the government's response to the Southport atrocities. Keir Starmer, the man who took the knee to the Black Lives Matter mob, decided to brutally crack down on rioters and protesters. Then the Prime Minister decided to withhold information from the public about Axel Ruder-Cabana, claiming that it would prejudice his trial. Then it emerged he'd condemned acts of terror in the past before they went to trial. Next, we saw the sentencing guidelines row with ethnic minorities potentially receiving preferential treatment when being sentenced. Indeed, just today, Baroness Faulkner, the chairman of the Equality and Human Rights Commission, has said that this could amount to discrimination against white men. Well, it doesn't end there. Some of you will remember this. A Palestine Action activist defacing an antique painting of former British Prime Minister Arthur Balfour at a Cambridge University college about this time last year. Well, the police have ended their investigation into Palestine Action. This was a case in which the suspects were filmed and the group involved publicly took responsibility for it. So why, I ask, have the police dropped the investigation? Well, it seems that your cause is fashionable. If your cause is fashionable enough, the rules do not apply to you. If you're a white working-class person in this country who riots or protests following the Southport atrocities, you will face the full force of the law. You'll be fast-tracked through the courts. You'll even get a prison sentence, often for things that you wrote on social media in the privacy of your own home. But if your cause involves Palestine or some other fashionable luxury belief that the elite class agree with, you'll get off scot-free. A few days ago, polling showed, however, that a mere 13% of British people support this approach to two-tier justice. Just 13% support two-tier justice. The vast majority of hard-working, tax-paying British people out there reject this two-tier justice system, as indeed do I. These sorts of beliefs are a fringe minority support for two-tier justice, which the majority of people out there reject outright. These sorts of policies are destroying trust in our judiciary, they're destroying trust in our legal system, in the police and in politics, and they must be brought to an end if we are going to restore any common sense to our system and our country. We must oppose two-tier justice. As ever, let me know your views at gbnews.com/yoursay or meet me on X at GoodwinMJ. But I'm joined now by my top panel, assistant comment editor at The Telegraph, Poppy Coburn, and political commentator Eve McQuillan. Poppy, two-tier justice. At first, Keir Starmer, Angela Rayner said it was a far-right conspiracy theory. Then we had that report from the Home Office that was leaked in January where they said if you talk about two-tier justice, it is a far-right extremist narrative. But since then, we've had a number of cases which indeed suggest we are living in a two-tier legal system.
You're completely right to say that we've had a number of cases, and I think this is going back years. I mean, the case that I always like to bring up is how the terrorist actors invoked against people. And as you say, during the Southport riots, this was used in quite a malicious and heavy-handed way against the people who were making comments on social media at the time in a heightened environment. And they were basically charged for not just public order offences, but in one case, which actually failed at court, for terror offences. But I think showing that video of this student at Cambridge who's slashing this Arthur Balfour painting. This isn't the first time that you've seen an activist group that has a predominantly, as you say, a pretty middle class, well-to-do background. You know, the university is, well, it's saying it's condemning the action, but they haven't named the student involved. We still don't know the name of the person who did it. Now, I'll be frank, if you're at the university, you see the back of this person's head, I bet they've been vocal about their activism. They know who it is. So, of course, we already have it. You know, if you are someone from a privileged background in this country, and I don't mean that by white working class privilege, I mean actual privilege, you're at a top university and you have fashionable views, you can get away with basically murder. Slap on the wrist.
Yeah, there's two-tier justice system, Eve. If you basically come from the right set, you can pretty much say do what you want. You're not going to face consequences. But if you happen to perhaps advocate views that the elite class don't support, you're going to feel the full force of the law.
So I think what we have is we definitely have discrimination, class-based discrimination in this country when it comes to justice, and that's wrong, and that shouldn't happen.
So we do have a two-tier justice system.
Would I call it a two-tier justice system? I think that some people get basically more penalties than others. In this country, and we live in a very unequal society, and that's wrong, and something should be done about it. I don't think it is the case if you have the right views, pro-Palestine views, for instance, there are no consequences. I think actually the bigger problems relating to our justice system in this country are just how many people get away with serious, serious violent crimes. And to be honest, I don't really care about a painting. I do care about the fact that the police can't be bothered to investigate violent offences. That's what I'm bothered about.
There's lots of people out there watching who will say, actually, we do care passionately about a painting or a statue of Winston Churchill or the cenotaph, that actually these are symbols of our national identity and our community. And also, I think many people... I wouldn't
put that painting the same as the cenotaph, by the way. I think they stand for very different things.
And lots of people will also be asking as to why, for example, the hate marches for months on end were allowed to pass without any real police intervention, no real counter-protest at all from legal authorities taking action. But if you protest over the Southport atrocities, you're held straight into prison.
No, these weren't hate marches. I was on some of these marches. They were not hate marches.
Well, I saw those marches too, and there were people singing anti-Semitic songs and expressing support for Hamas.
Always unacceptable.
Maybe we should say, I'm going to take the middle ground position here, right, between you guys. I don't like banning marches. I actually want to live in a properly liberal country. I just want fair treatment for everyone. I don't think judges should be saying, you're white working class, so I'm going to give you a different level of sentencing to anyone else. I just want equal treatment. That isn't being said. The problem is at the moment that I think it is heavily biased towards one way, and it's not necessarily being pushed by a political position. It's what the biases these judges have. They come from a certain generation, they have certain views that they think other groups need a leg up in terms of justice, and that is what's reflected in the Sentencing Council. If we actually had equal justice in this country, it would be everyone's allowed to get their views seen, everyone gets treated equally under the law, and unfortunately that is not the case. I don't want reverse discrimination at all. I want everyone to be fair.
What's being proposed, we need to be really clear what's being proposed, because the way some of this is talked about in the media, it's like if you're from an ethnic minority, you're going to get a couple of months off your sentence, which obviously is wrong. What is being proposed is that more people have these pre-sentencing reports where we understand the context when judges are making decisions. And I think for a judge to make a legitimate decision, that context is pretty important.
Just to be clear, though, it's not all people who are being considered. It's if you belong to a racial, sexual, gender minority, if you're trans. If I'm a white, straight, conservative guy, I'm not being considered pre-sentencing.
Yeah. Well, no, you can be. The judge can decide, actually, I do want to know more about this context. It's just not routine that the judge will know about this context.
So it's a two-tier system that's wired against...
And I think that your lawyer can also request that. I think that's wrong, by the way. What I think is
important... And this was based on David Lammy's recommendations, now the current Labour Foreign Minister.
To try and shift what is perceived as inequality and a lack of understanding in the context and not getting context about certain people, to get that context to make better decisions. I think judges should have that context about everybody.
Oh, I think judges should add that context about nobody. I've got the completely different opinion to you. These identity categories are so heavy-handed, they are basically meaningless. As soon as you are saying this person is a woman or this person is a racial minority or a sexual minority and say, I, as a judge, am going to apply that in a kind of heavy-handed, bureaucratic way, you have lost the idea of justice. Justice is blind. Justice should be looking at what you have done, not where you come from, what you look like, which sexuality you have, what kind of lifestyle you have. It should be the crime that you have committed. And if we've lost that, we've lost who we are as a country.
But we haven't lost that.
But
nobody is saying that. Have the
Sentencing Council are, of course.
No, they're not.
I mean,
they're saying we need more context to make better decisions. And frankly, so where I live, for instance, the most commonly shoplifted item is Calpol. I want to know a bit about the context, about why that person is stealing Calpol.
If they're trans, for example.
I don't care if they're trans or not, that's not relevant. But I want to know about I want to know about the context in which people are committing their crimes for sentences to be fair. That's what is being brought forward, and I think that that's a good idea. I think it should be brought forward for people regardless of their background, but more information is better for better decisions.
But I think maybe as Poppy's saying, it isn't being brought forward for every group in society, only some groups. So, but where the left goes wrong in trying to counter inequality is it then hardwires this identity politics, which puts some groups above others.
This isn't the left. This is a Tory policy. This was asked for in 2022.
It was based on recommendations. I agree with you. It was introduced under the Tories, but it was based on the recommendations provided by David Lamb.
And of course, he's opposing it right now. Shabana Mahmood. He's a Labour Party minister. Yeah. And I think, and also Baroness Faulkner. These are not right-wing culture warriors. These are very, people who generally have centre-left politics, who are taking a totally reasonable position, which is the Sentencing Council guidelines do not work. They are too heavy-handed, and they are taking a very flat view of identity politics. If it's good enough for the Labour Party, I think it should be good enough for all of us.
Well, indeed. And on that note, thank you to my panel for that discussion and debate. After the break, we're going to be continuing on the theme of two-tier Britain with a State of the Nation exclusive. We've got a whistleblower, get this, who's going to be joining me in just a moment to reveal the extent to which diversity, equality, inclusion, ideology, DEI, has infected our public institutions. You're going to want to hear this. See you in a couple of minutes.
Headliners on GB News 11 p.m. every night. It's got 3 top comedians going through the next day's newspapers so you don't have to read them, which is great.
That's a good point. He's lying. I mean, maybe he's not lying.
That's Headliners every night from 11 p.m. and 5 a.m. as well on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Britain's newsroom. Weekday mornings from 9:30.
Could Doctor Who be for the chop after more than 60 years? Well, here to explain why there's a lot of rumour, a buzz about this story is the GB News entertainment editor, Alex Davies. Alex, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
What on earth is going on?
Well, this has all sort of come around because reports have emerged that the lead actor, Ncuti Gatwa, is planning on leaving. He's only been there for 2 years, but apparently he's already eyeing up the exit door. He wants to reportedly set up a new life in LA. He's got countless Hollywood opportunities lined up for him, according to reports. And the reports are also suggesting his team aren't too fond of some of the woke storylines that have emerged in the last few years. The series has come under fire a number of times. There's been several storylines that have been criticised for pushing certain narratives. They cast a black actor as Isaac Newton, for one. There are other examples, including misgendering aliens.
Do aliens have gender?
Well, you'd be surprised, apparently. There's one called a meep that David Tennant, who briefly reprised his role before Ncuti, he got the meep, their gender, wrong and was pulled up about it by a trans character.
Just very forced, it seems. Very forced. Oh, we need to get in the gender nouns and the pronouns. But there was also a bit of heat just for having a female doctor, wasn't there? Jodie Whittaker.
There was, but I feel like that's always going to get heat. When you take a fictional character, a fictional institution, which has been white men predominantly, and you put something that goes against that, you're going to get attention. This one in particular, like I say, with these sort of storylines, has garnered more attention than most.
GB News, the People's Channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to State of the Nation tonight with me, Matt Goodwin. Now, your views have been coming in thick and fast. Brian says it is simply two-tier Labour ideological discrimination against white people. Stephen says Tony Blair changed the rules on appointing judges so they became political appointments rather than being appointed on merit. Well, we're going to talk about this a little bit more now because it's no secret that diversity, equity and inclusion, or DEI, ideology has infected many of our public institutions, but last week's news of two-tier sentencing guidelines has illustrated how dangerous this ideology really is, how it's having real-world implications out there in the system. Now, my next guest has decided to publicly reflect on his time when he applied to become an assistant judge and how, simply because of his race, ethnicity, his application was deferred to a race relations committee. It was because of this that he decided not to press ahead with the application. But this case really shows the true colours of the DEI agenda and indeed what's wrong with it. So I'm joined now by the man himself, Colin Winter, KC. Colin, could you just tell viewers a little bit about what you experienced in the early phase of your career?
Yes, well, the earliest stage, I was a barrister, and back in the 80s, that was very difficult because in those days there was no attempt to try and hide what was quite racist approach to recruitment. But then in about the 1990s, most chambers, good chambers, sought to improve that, and they were looking for good black applicants. I managed to get into good chambers. But the point I think you had me here to discuss is when you move to the next stage of your career and seek to begin looking at judicial options, and you start out by trying to become, they were called assistant recorders back in the day, now they're called something else. And so there's the first time I ever saw an advert which actually said at the bottom, applications from, I think we were called black and ethnic minorities in those days, BEMs, particularly welcome. So I thought they meant me. So I thought this advert says, Colin, please apply. So I applied, and in the course of filling out the application, there's a box which you tick, giving your colour or race. There was no identifiers in those days. You simply put what you were. And I then noticed that my application was going to be referred to this, called the Race Relations Committee of the Bar or something like that.
Right.
And I objected. I said, why is my application being referred to other people? Why can I not just be appointed or not on merit? And I kicked up a fuss. Someone came to see me from the Ministry of Justice. We had a nice cup of tea in my room overlooking Fountain Court. And we had this argument where she tried to persuade me why this was a good thing. And I said, no, I want to achieve things on merit alone and nothing else.
Yeah.
And in the end, she left and calling me, saying to me I was to the right of Genghis Khan. I then asked her to leave. But she wasn't. It was a very pleasant conversation. But
and what year was this approximately?
This must be shortly after the Human Rights Act had come into force. It must be in the early years of Blair, late 90s, early 2000s.
Now, since then, arguably, the DEI agenda has become even more entrenched in public institutions. I've seen it in the universities, where, for example, we've prioritised students from certain backgrounds, often, to be frank, at the expense of students from white working class backgrounds. And are we not perhaps living through the death of meritocracy, the death of the idea that you should get to where you deserve to be within your careers and institutions based not on your fixed identity characteristics, but based on your academic excellence, your achievement and competence?
And it is a problem, I think, that high-achieving minorities have, where I never applied again to be an assistant recorder or deputy judge because I did not want to achieve things and have people, my peers, my contemporaries, think Colin got that because he's black. But recently, you'll know from, I think, other programmes you've had on this channel, the Bar Standards Board has proposed that there be an obligation on every practising barrister to advance EDI in their practice. Now, I do insurance law. My job is looking at insurance wordings and saying what they mean, arguing in court what the words mean, hoping to win. I rarely see a witness. Mostly it's just words, words, words. There's no room for diversity in my work. You know, the clients may be diverse. They come from all over the world. But I argue what words mean. And so imposing on me an obligation to advance EDI, I'd have to... I mean, I do it anyway, in a sense. I mentor young students who come to me. Some are black, some are white, some are from Ireland. I don't... wherever they come from. But the idea of making it part of my obligation, when my job is to argue fearlessly and independently for my clients, try and win cases or settle them as best I can, not to bother about whether social ills that have happened further down the chain, it's not my job to fix them.
I'll give you another example from the universities. If you apply for an academic job or an academic research grant, you now have to submit something called a DEI statement, which is a page of A4, where you have to pledge allegiance to the diversity, equity and inclusion agenda. Now, why on earth is that required for somebody going for an academic job or applying for a research grant? Or indeed, why do we have to adjust things like our reading lists for students to reflect a DEI agenda? Surely we just want to show the students the best research, the most impactful research. And, I mean, is there a sense within the legal system more generally that maybe this political project has gone too far? You look at Trump, he's rolling it back. Is there any sense at all among your colleagues that this is just a political project that is undermining this notion of meritocracy?
I think I've got to be quite careful here, because the Bar Council has... I think they have responded to the Bar Standard Board suggestion. I speak as an independent person who... I work in my own chambers. I don't have any colleagues. I have no regular clients. They come to me when they're in trouble. So I'm able to speak more freely than most are. I have no colleagues who work for people who might be affected by what I say. So I can say it. But I think that to say that there is concern, I really can't say. But I know that a lot of my friends have expressed concern about what they're going to be required to do to demonstrate that they have advanced EDI. But I don't think that's going to be the proposal finally. I think the Bar Standard Board maintains it's their duty under the Legal Services Act to promote or to require or to push this. But as practitioners, our job is to fight cases, to advise clients.
But I think also we need to be very clear about what we mean by these terms, diversity, equality and inclusion. So I'm always struck, diversity is often used to mean everything except diversity of thought. So it means racial, sexual, gender diversity except diversity of thought. Equality essentially means forcing equal outcomes among groups by discriminating against some groups, like white men, for example. And inclusion often means including everybody while excluding non-conformist alternative viewpoints.
And I'll tell you the problem. The problem is that if we have barristers required to do this, to advance EDI, barristers become judges. Judges become Court of Appeal judges. Court of Appeal judges and higher, they control. They are the guardians of our common law, and this is a common law-based system. And so the danger is not necessarily now, but if you're looking 15, 20, 30 years ahead, if you have a EDI mandated barristers who then become our judges and in charge of our common law and our statutory law and our European law and so forth, such as we have remaining. And that's where the real...
So the whole system becomes rotten,
It becomes
basically.
rigged, effectively. But the point is that we are supposed to be independent, fearless thinkers who decide things on merit. And that's how the common law was created in this country, not by having people who think the same way and have been directed to think the same way. So you have to have this independence of thought, freedom of thought, in the bar and then also in the judiciary.
Well, more freedom of thought, absolutely. Thank you, Colin, for sharing your experience with us tonight. Absolutely fascinating stuff. Now, after the break, the latest piece of evidence emerges from Germany. You're going to want to listen to this, a new intelligence report that the Wuhan lab leak theory was correct after all. I'll see you in a couple of minutes. Yeah, we've got this fascinating...
Dinner under the stars tonight?
That reminds me of our travel insurance.
You mean all clear skies?
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News travel destinations forecast.
We've got some warm weather on the way over the next few days across the eastern Mediterranean, but further west, very unsettled still, with some heavy rain and thunderstorms. The showers most prominent across parts of southern Spain through the course of Friday, an improving story across parts of Portugal, but colder than average temperatures across Iberia. Some heavy rain and some snow across northern parts of Italy and the Balkans, but down across Greece, some fairly warm and sunny weather for the time of year with temperatures above average.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News travel destinations forecast.
I'm Andrew Pearce. This is GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more. Whether it's breaking royal news, please bring us up to date, or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking...
This is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get the book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop star to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation, isn't it?
No,
because the failure is
you're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back,
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
and we do not shy away from the difficult stuff.
Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood.
So join me on Jubes and Co weeknights at 6 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes. Thank you for joining us on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to State of the Nation with me, Matt Goodwin. Now, time for something really shocking. It's emerged that a German intelligence report has found an 80 to 95% probability that COVID-19 came from the Wuhan lab accident and was suppressed by German Chancellor Angela Merkel. Now, some of you may remember it wasn't long ago that the Wuhan lab leak theory was dismissed as misinformation. Indeed, some even claimed that it was racist, the favourite word for the elite class today, but now it is quite clearly the most likely source of the virus. I'm joined tonight by one of the very first people to shine a light on this scandal, Matt Ridley, who joins us down the line. And I must say he was one of the first voices on this, a courageous voice challenging the dominant consensus. So, Matt, what are we learning from this report?
Well, what we're learning is that the German intelligence whatever they're called, agency, said pretty early on that they thought it was very likely that it was a lab leak. And they based that on some documents that they managed to lift out of the Wuhan Institute of Virology, including dissertations, and the research that was going on there. Now, we don't know what those documents were, but they made that assessment pretty early on, and then they sat on it. They didn't share it with the Americans until very recently. They didn't share it with other intelligence agencies, as far as we can. And we've only found out about it because it was leaked to the Süddeutsche Zeitung and others. It's just yet another example of how difficult it has been to get intelligence agencies, journalists, politicians to face up to the fact that we are almost certainly dealing with an enormous industrial accident that killed north of 20 million people.
And what do you think this is telling us about the political authorities? I mean, there has been this suggestion that Angela Merkel perhaps suppressed this information. I mean, what's it telling us about how politicians are trying to control the supply of information to voters?
Well, I mean, I had a similar experience with trying to talk to British security agencies and saying, look, you have to take the lab leak seriously. It's not a conspiracy theory. The evidence is really quite strong now. It's getting stronger all the time. The evidence for the alternative is very weak. And they just weren't interested in listening. And there were three reasons, I think, for this reluctance. One was that some people didn't want to upset China. Some people said so explicitly. Two was that some people wanted it to be a cautionary tale about chopping down the rainforest and things, and it didn't suit them. And three was that quite a lot of people thought it would damage the reputation of scientists. Well, it would have done an awful lot less damage if they'd said, look, there's one rogue lab that's gone wrong here. The rest of science is fine. By the way, you said I was one of the first. I wasn't, actually. In the first couple of months, I was going around telling people, no, it probably isn't a lab leak, because I was conned by an article written by some scientists saying, here's the evidence it's not a lab leak. And I later found out that they didn't believe it themselves, even as they were writing that article. So it's really it's a very significant scandal, this, and it needs to be brought to light and investigated thoroughly, and I'm not confident it's going to happen. We're not quite there yet, but we're at the beyond reasonable doubt stage.
But there is something broader going on here, isn't there, in that what's often called conspiracy theory, we've seen it, for example, with two-tier justice in this country. Angela Rayner comes out and says, well, two-tier justice is a conspiracy theory. But actually 6-7 months down the line, we then get evidence about sentencing guidelines which are clearly advocating two-tier justice. There's something here about ideas, theories, concepts that fly in the face of the elite consensus. And the political class, the expert class, just seems incapable of sort of accepting it and interrogating it and thinking about it critically. Yet at the same time, if something else happens that fits within that groupthink, for example, the claim that Brexit was caused by Russian misinformation, which we know wasn't true, but they embrace that uncritically. I mean, there's something here about knowledge and information, isn't there? There's a sort of deeper story.
Yes, there is. And just as an example of that, today, the BBC was very slow to carry this story until I tweeted about it and saying, why isn't the BBC carrying this story? They've been very quick to carry any story about there might have been a raccoon dog that was infected in that market, et cetera, et cetera. Something happened to the elite class in the middle of the last decade, sometime around Brexit and Trump's first election, and they said to themselves, we've got to stop being neutral. Not only that, we're going to weaponize this word disinformation. We're going to weaponize misinformation and conspiracy theory and things like that to shoot down ideas that we think are wrong and dangerous, whether they're true or not. That's no longer the criterion we mind about. Now, that's going quite far saying that, but I'm sorry, I have been gobsmacked by how one-sided the approach to the misinformation question has become, and how many things that were originally described as misinformation by the elite have actually turned out to be true.
Well, I'm always struck by Andrew Sullivan's comment, the moderate conservative columnist in America, who says we're living through the greatest radicalization of the elite class since the 1960s. In other words, they've gone off a cliff when it comes to many of these issues. But thank you to Lord Ridley for his time and thoughts on this compelling development. But now it's time for the debate that appears to be tearing a hole in the conservative side of British politics, which is the question of mass deportations. I made my views clear on this show yesterday, and so has Nigel Farage. Mass deportations are simply not feasible, but many on the right believe to take this position is to sell out or to be soft. Well, to debate this tonight, I'm joined by my top panel, assistant comment editor at The Telegraph, Poppy Coburn, and political commentator, Eve McQuillan. Poppy Coburn, there are lots of people on X over the last couple of days who have been saying, look, the problem is parties like Reform have gone too soft. What this country needs is mass deportations of illegal and perhaps in some cases legal immigrants, and we need a radical shake-up. Where are you on this? And do you think actually they're right to say that a party like Reform needs to go even further by deporting hundreds of thousands or even millions of people?
I mean, if there are millions of illegal people currently in the UK, they should be deported. That is the purpose of the term illegal. Going further than that is a different question. But I found it interesting when people talk about what is possible and impossible in politics. A couple of years ago, actually 5 years ago this weekend, we had the lockdown, anniversary of lockdown beginning. This was doing the impossible. This was keeping everybody in their homes, with police patrolling outside. If you tried to sit on a park bench, they would, fine you or try and arrest you. We've done impossible things before. And I think, I completely understand that Reform's position here is that we have to focus on other policy issues as well. We can't let this be like the be-all and end-all of our party platform. But if people here illegally, they must be removed, no matter the cost, no matter how politically difficult or legally difficult it must be. If we can't do this, we may as well just give up the term illegal, because it clearly means nothing.
Well, just one thing I would say on that. I mean, the difference between the COVID lockdowns and the issue of mass deportations is that upwards of 70-80% of British people supported the lockdowns. And if you look at the polling on deportations, particularly, for example, deporting people who haven't committed serious crimes and who have often been in Britain for a long period of time, only a minority of Brits would support that policy.
I mean, I suppose I'm perhaps in the minority in that. I mean, I certainly agree that the many, many people who are coming over on small boats should be immediately returned. I understand it's easy to say this from a platform where I'm not actually in government.
Just to be clear, I would also agree with removing illegal migrants who have entered Britain on the small boats. But the debate on the right seems to now be moving at such a pace that there are people around the sort of Rupert Lowe point, side of the debate, who are saying, look, actually, we should move beyond deporting illegal migrants to deporting British nationals.
I completely agree with you here. Let's not, count our chickens before we've laid eggs. Let's do what we have to do at the very beginning, which is, again, we haven't done any actual deportations in this country for a very long time. I mean, our border force has been completely hamstrung. Let's deal with the basics. Let's deal with stopping the boats and removing those who are here illegally, and then we can start having other conversations if we want to.
Eve McQuillan, Labour have removed, in fact, both Labour and the Tories have removed just 3% of all people who have come into the country on small boats since 2018. It's a pretty damning statistic. We need to deport more illegal migrants, don't we?
Well, so with the small boats, we need to assess asylum claims quickly. With this broader group of people...
And just to be clear, of the claims that we are assessing, Labour are approving 2/3 of the people they are giving initial decisions to.
And it's a pretty high bar to get refugee status in this country, which suggests that these people have legitimate reason to be here.
Or alternatively, Labour's just rubber stamping a lot of claims to get them through the system.
I don't think that that's what's going on in the Home Office. I think it's a pretty high bar. But what I will say with the broader group of people who don't have the right status to be here is we need to consider, when we're having this conversation, who these people are. 25% of these people who don't have the right status to be here, who are here illegally, were born here. 50% of them came here as children. What we have in this country is we don't have a common sense immigration system where you can regulise your status. Like in France, they have a system where you can regulise your status. If you're here without the right papers, there are processes through which you can get the right papers. Because my partner recently became a British citizen, and it cost us several £1,000s. There are people in this country who've been here since birth who simply don't have that money. They've made a mistake with the admin, etc., etc. Are we really saying those people who've been here since they were children should be rounded up in the middle of the night?
I mean, I think when we have laws, they have to be enforced properly. I completely understand that some people will say...
That would be enforcing it properly.
I mean, enforcing laws properly would be saying that those who have a regular status should be considered for removal. I mean, this is not currently happening. We are having a fantasy debate here. I mean, the people who agree with you politically have won. This is the way the country has been run for the last 20 years. We do not remove people consistently. We find it very difficult to remove people to country of origin, particularly if we have poor diplomatic relationships with these people. I agree that a lot of people who do the right thing end up paying tens of thousands of pounds to get their status regularised. I mean, people find this all the time. They're trying to marry someone from abroad and they feel they're being penalised. But it is also objectively true that we have a gigantic problem in this country with the number of people who are here illegally, who we have no record of, who are working in the black economy, and who we cannot seem to remove.
The Pew Research Centre estimates we have about somewhere between 750,000 and 1.2 million illegal migrants in Britain, who, as Poppy say, they don't have the right to be here. They don't have the right to work here. Thomas Sowell once said immigration laws are the only laws ever discussed in terms of how to help people break them. I think lots of taxpayers out there are watching this issue and feeling as though the state is more interested in helping illegal migrants than helping hard-working, tax-paying British citizens.
So I wouldn't say that. I think, as I go back to the point, who are these people? How did they get here? So most people... No, not illegally. Most people got here legally and then something changed with their status. So they came here on a spousal visa and their marriage broke down. They got the wrong advice. Something happened that isn't they've come over in the middle of the night to work on the black market. It's something that's happened in their life. And what we need is a system where we're making sensible choices, like someone who came here as a child. Right, if they've lived here 20 years, we need a process where they can regularise their status. We don't have that.
Of the 155,000 people that came over illegally on small boats, are you saying
it's not illegal to come here on a small boat?
Right.
And claim asylum.
That's incorrect.
Now under
that's incorrect.
The way Labour has changed the law.
Incorrect. Anyway, so I presume you'd allow them to stay in the country, which would be interesting. I would certainly
I'd allow them to have their asylum claims assessed.
Thank you to my panel for that debate. I'm sure it's going to continue and rage onwards on social media and elsewhere. After the break, as Donald Trump cracks down on woke universities across the pond because they're failing to defend Jewish students, I'll be asking whether we should be doing the same right here in the UK, and we'll be debating this with a top university professor. See you in a couple of minutes.
Hello there, good evening. Welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. To finish off the week, we're going to see a cold start tomorrow, frost in places, then another day of sunny spells, but also some showers. And it's still going to be feeling largely chilly too. That's all thanks to this northerly flow of air, bringing in some cold air from the Arctic, stretching its way across the country. There's some slightly lighter wind, which are going to make things feel a little less chilly as we head into tomorrow. But for the overnight period, a continuation of some showers feeding into northern areas, likely bringing some snow, particularly across the Scottish Highlands, and then later on to the night we could see some hill snow across parts of Wales too. But a mix of cloud and some clearer spells, but the clearest skies across parts of the south and southeast, where we're likely to see quite a sharp frost. But overall into tomorrow, it is going to be a cold start for many. Still plenty of showers by the time we start Friday morning across the northeast of Scotland. Perhaps a little bit brighter across the west, though likely seeing some patchy frost here. Largely dry and bright across parts of Northern Ireland, though can't rule out a few showers skirting coastal areas. And a mix of cloud and some showers across the rest of England and Wales, once again bringing in some snow across the Welsh hills. Through the course of the morning, things will brighten up, any frost or ice likely quickly melting away, and it's going to be a fairly similar day. Once again, still plenty of showers feeding into eastern coast, these spreading more inland through the course of the day, but western parts of Scotland, parts of Northern Ireland seeing a largely dry day, and temperatures still fairly similar to what they were today, highs around 8 to 9 Celsius, and in those lighter winds still feeling pleasant in the sunshine. For the beginning of the weekend, once again a cold and frosty start, this time across many northern areas, but through the course of the day brightening up, and we're likely to see fewer showers for the start of the weekend. That's away from northern parts of Scotland, so some bright sunshine on offer, but perhaps turning a little bit cloudier into the afternoon, and into next week staying largely dry, but it is going to be remaining cold, still with a chance of some overnight frost. Bye-bye.
In the GB newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, and as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
Welcome back to State of the Nation tonight with me, Matt Goodwin. Now, as has been expected, Donald Trump has been busy pulling funding from universities in America who don't get in line with his opposition to diversity, equality and inclusion ideology, including, get this, $400 million, it's a big number, from Columbia University for failing to protect Jewish students. Lots of anti-Semitism on campus, lots of pro-Gaza, pro-Hamas protests. But perhaps equally importantly, via the Department for Government Efficiency, or DOGE, the bloated research grant industry is facing a complete overhaul too, not least because of all the various DEI initiatives within the university system. They're all being rooted out. But should we adopt a similar approach here in the UK? That's the question I want to debate tonight. Now, I'm joined by the top university professor of politics at the University of Buckingham. You'll know him. He's a regular on this channel, Professor Eric Kaufman, as well as my panel, assistant comment editor at The Telegraph, Poppy Coburn, and political commentator Eve McQuillan. Eric, first of all, Trump is waging war on woke ideology in universities. Columbia's lost $400 million, an enormous number, because of the anti-Semitism and the failure to protect Jewish students. Is DEI dead on campus in America?
Yes. In a way, Trump has gone after DEI. He's seeking to ban it across the sector. I think it's very important to note that the federal government in the United States gives a huge amount of money in research and student loan subsidies, and therefore it controls the purse strings. Yeah. It shows what can be done with a determined administration that is willing to take these questions on and endure the brickbats, the charges of being racist and sexist and etc. So yes, the answer is this is being effective.
Okay, so if we were to do that here in the UK, let's say we had a new body that was anti-woke body on looking at the universities in the UK, and we put a professor in charge who happened to be critical of woke ideology. Not sure who that would be. What are some of the things they would be doing?
Well, I think the first thing they would be doing is stopping the funding flow to what I would call scholar activism or culture, research that is essentially pushing DEI ideology. And that is a form of socialism I call cultural socialism, which says equal outcomes by race and sex is our goal, as well as emotional harm protection for members of historically marginalized groups. That is we're going to privilege that over excellence, over the pursuit of truth, over free speech.
So this is all the white privilege stuff, the white guilt stuff, the decolonization stuff, the diversity on steroids stuff. Basically, what you're saying is all research grants that support that agenda will be slashed, and we'll get back to doing what universities should be doing, which is pursuing truth and doing good, impartial research.
Correct. It is worth saying that people can still do this research, so this isn't stopping people from doing this, which is a clampdown on academic freedom. It's just to say we as a democracy have decided we're not going to fund this. You look at the U.S., there's been an explosion from 0 to 24 or 27% of the grants in the National Science Foundation, NSF, which are DEI focused. In Britain, it's been the same pattern, and in Canada, the same pattern. This is growing like a weed. We need to cut it back.
Can I make another suggestion? Can we start sacking all of the university administrators with diversity in their job titles?
That's exactly what's going on,
Diversity
yes.
officer, equality diversity officer, DEI officer. Often they get paid as much as the Prime Minister.
Exactly. They should go. That whole agenda should go. Now, that's not to say you can't try and widen your applicant pool, but let's widen it for all the people that are excluded, including, let's say, conservatives, you know, let's say people from rural areas or small towns. And if we're talking about recruiting faculty, since we know that people with academic parents are 25 times, as much as 25 times more likely to be academics, maybe we should look at that much greater source of skew in the professoriate.
Poppy Coburn, we need to get universities back to doing what they're supposed to do, which is defending traditional academic virtues, not imposing this political dogma on students and faculty.
Well, the thing that Trump gets it right is that it's done through the law. And I think if we want to do the same thing in the UK, the first thing we have to get rid of is the Equality Act. Like, you know, this ideology isn't just born out of nothing, it's born out of a legislative base. In the US, it was an interpretation of civil rights law. Trump has been very clever using executive orders to basically roll all of that stuff back. You know, as Eric says, when the money's not there, the people aren't saying it. We need to do the exact same thing in the UK. But until you actually get to the foundation of this, which again is law, you are not going to do anything. You're just putting out slogans, you're just putting out sound bites. When the government can do that, then we're going to see some real change.
Steve, let me ask you a question. I just said to a guest earlier on, when I applied for academic jobs, I had to submit this little statement, basically like I was in North Korea. I pledge allegiance to diversity, equality and inclusion. I will do this in my teaching. I will do this in my research.
Did you get any jobs?
I actually got many jobs and many research grants as long as I was playing the game. Now, when I became critical of DEI, guess what? The universities didn't want me around anymore. But surely, these are supposed to be ideologically neutral institutions, right? They're funded by taxpayers. We shouldn't be forcing academics to do stuff like that.
They're also funded by students' money. To be honest, I don't recognise this conceptualisation of British universities of having all of this money flying around. These are really cash-strapped institutions.
But on DEI... So why have Oxford just spent £2.5 million on diversity jobs?
I didn't know that they had done.
On people whose only
they don't
job...
spend very much on paying their actual staff. Perhaps because we live in a very unequal society. We know that if you go to private school, you're a million times more likely to go to Oxford. Actually, that's not particularly fair. We need to reset that.
So what we should do, if I'm hearing you correctly, is we should strip out all the DEI ideology, all the money we spend on that, and we should give it to studentships for white working class kids from left behind communities.
I don't think we should be giving it to people as scholarships. I think we should be putting it into trying to get people from backgrounds who don't typically go to Oxford by encouraging people to apply. Absolutely.
Yeah. Now, Eric, if this DEI pushback does happen in the UK, is it going to be led by the Tories or is it going to be led by Reform?
I would say Reform. I mean, the Tories had their chance and they were asleep at the switch. They nodded it through. They didn't really have an interest in this, partly because they wanted to play in the sandbox that the media allowed them to play in. It's the economic sandbox.
So when Reform are looking for a new university czar to oversee the DEI cull, I wonder who they will call. Thank you, Professor Eric Hoffman, for his contributions. Up next is Bev Turner, who is stepping in for Patrick Christis. Bev, what have you got on your show this evening?
Hello, Matt. That's right. It is Bevan for Patrick. Tonight, we're going to be talking about NHS England being scrapped. What does it actually mean? The latest survey, which should give some hope to Reform voters that all is not lost after this extraordinary week. Dyslexia, is it real? Or is it something that is just made up to make money for people who work in educational psychology? And 3,500 churches have gone from the UK in the last 10 years. What do we do about it? What have we lost? Oh, and Tesco Yellow Label food, it's free from 9:30. We're sending a reporter to bring me back a swag bag.
Great stuff, Bev. Everyone online is telling me that the party's over for Reform, and then we get polls and Reform's #1 on 27% of the vote. So there you go. Well, that's all coming up after the weather. I'm going to be back next week. No, I'm not. I'm going to be back tomorrow at 8 p.m. Friday. Stay with me, Matt Goodwin, on State of the Nation. See you then.
Even though we'll see a cloudy start, it'll be a bright outlook for the rest of the day. Boxed Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, good evening. Welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. To finish off the week, we're going to see a cold start tomorrow, frost in places, then another day of sunny spells, but also some showers. And it's still going to be feeling largely chilly too. That's all thanks to this northerly flow of air, bringing in some cold air from the Arctic, stretching its way across the country. There's some slightly lighter wind, which are going to make things feel a little less chilly as we head into tomorrow. But for the overnight period, a continuation of some showers feeding into northern areas, likely bringing some snow, particularly across the Scottish Highlands, and then later on to the night we could see some hill snow across parts of Wales too. But a mix of cloud and some clearer spells, but the clearest skies across parts of the south and southeast, where we're likely to see quite a sharp frost. But overall into tomorrow, it is going to be a cold start for many. Still plenty of showers by the time we start Friday morning across the northeast of Scotland. Perhaps a little bit brighter across the west, though likely seeing some patchy frost here. Largely dry and bright across parts of Northern Ireland, though can't rule out a few showers skirting coastal areas. And a mix of cloud and some showers across the rest of England and Wales, once again bringing in some snow across the Welsh hills. Through the course of the morning, things will brighten up, any frost or ice likely quickly melting away, and it's going to be a fairly similar day. Once again, still plenty of showers feeding into eastern coast, these spreading more inland through the course of the day, but western parts of Scotland, parts of Northern Ireland seeing a largely dry day, and temperatures still fairly similar to what they were today, highs around 8 to 9 Celsius, and in those lighter winds still feeling pleasant in the sunshine. For the beginning of the weekend, once again a cold and frosty start, this time across many northern areas, but through the course of the day brightening up, and we're likely to see fewer showers for the start of the weekend. That's away from northern parts of Scotland, so some bright sunshine on offer, but perhaps turning a little bit cloudier into the afternoon. And into next week, staying largely dry, but it is going to be remaining cold, still with a chance of some overnight frost. Bye-bye.
There will be a light breeze in the morning, leading to a warm front. Boxed heat pumps, sponsors of weather on GB News.
We want to spruce up your spring with an incredible £17,777 in tax-free cash that you can spend however you like. But that's not all, as you'll also receive not one, but 2 brand new designer watches and a fabulous Mulberry handbag. For a chance to win the cash, 2 watches and a designer bag, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus 1 standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus 1 standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. Call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge, or post your name and number to GB12 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrants must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 4th of April. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation, isn't it?
Because
the failure is...
You're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff.
Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood.
So join me on Jubes & Co. weeknights at 6 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more.
Whether it's breaking royal news, please bring us up to date, or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
9 o'clock Thursday night, I'm Bev Turner in for Patrick Christie's Tonight.
So I'm bringing management of the NHS back into democratic